With several recent trailer releases for massive superhero movies like Thor Ragnarok, Justice League, and Black Panther, excitement for upcoming superhero entertainment seems to be at a fever pitch. So far, every release for Phase 3 of the MCU has been praised by critics and fans alike. Even the DCEU managed to score its first huge critical and financial hit earlier this year with Wonder Woman, which pushed expectations for Justice League to a new level. Not to mention, there's plenty of excitement for the culmination of Netflix's various Marvel series, The Defenders, as well as the new seasons of several DC series. There is so much superhero stuff out or coming out, and it's all so insanely popular. This forces me to ask a hard question. Is there a breaking point for superhero entertainment? And if so, when? Will superhero movies and series eventually oversaturate the market and start to bore the majority of viewers, or at least a much higher percentage than they currently are? I understand some people are going to hit the dislike button now, if they didn't already based solely on the title. Why do I have to be such a downer? Why can't I just shut up and enjoy the ride? To answer this, let me take you back in time, to a time called the 90s, when the disembodied voice speaking to you now was in a body, and that body was a freshman in high school. One day, I walked into class carrying a collected X-Men volume, and a fellow student pointed to me and said, "Hey Poindexter." I wasn't wearing thick glasses, I didn't have a pocket protector, and this guy had never called me anything like this before. He said it because I was carrying a comic book. The point of the story is, mainstream perception of comic books has changed drastically since then. Comic book stories had not yet become a truly mainstream form of entertainment, unlike today.
Liking comic books is popular?
I know. It's bullshit.
I believe Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios deserve a lot of the credit for this cultural shift. There were of course a number of very successful superhero movies before the MCU, but each of these and their subsequent sequels seem to have a relatively short lifespan in popularity, whereas the MCU has somehow cheated death during its over 9-year run. But let me illustrate this a bit. The forefather of all superhero movies, Superman, made $300 million in 1978, making it the second highest grossing film of the year, behind Grease. Before Superman, there had been some fairly successful short animated films, radio dramas, and TV series, but comic book superheroes hadn't yet made a real impact at the box office. To give you an idea, the 1966 film adaptation of the Adam West Batman series made about $1.7 million at the box office.
Some days you just can't get rid of a bomb.
The genre was there, it had a following, but before Superman it hadn't really hit the big time. The problem was, as time passed, this permeation of mainstream culture never seemed to last. Superman 1 made $300 million, Superman 2 made $190 million, Superman 3 made $80 million, and Superman 4 made $36 million, which is actually impressive considering how bad that last movie was. Money isn't everything, but the critical reception of this series follows a similar pattern. Of course, this drop-off is due to poor writing and directing, not the genre's potential. But regardless, the public perception of superhero stories suffered. To mainstream audiences and studios, superhero movies had become a bit lame by 1983 with Superman 3. 1987's Superman 4 was just a nail in the coffin. But 2 years after the final entry of Superman, a new cycle of mainstream popularity began.
I'm Batman.
For 1989's Batman, Tim Burton conceived of an entirely new direction for superhero movies. Dark, visually elaborate, and inhabiting a rich comic book world. Batman made $411 million at the box office, making it the #1 movie of the year domestically, second internationally. But the cycle of diminishing returns continued. The sequel, Batman Returns, made $266 million. Then the series picked up a bit in 1995 when it was first passed to Joel Schumacher for Batman Forever. That made $336 million. The fourth installment, Batman and Robin, made $238 million in 1997, which is not much of a drop-off financially, but critically speaking, it nosedived straight into the ground.
What killed the dinosaurs? The Ice Age!
Once again, by 1997, superhero movies had become passé to mainstream audiences. This trend continued somewhat in the early 2000s with superhero movie franchises like X-Men and Spider-Man. Until 2008, when everything changed.
My turn.
Not only because of the birth of the MCU, but also the enormous success of the second entry in Christopher Nolan's Batman series, The Dark Knight. The first entry of the MCU, Iron Man, did impressively well with $585 million at the box office. However, The Dark Knight almost tripled its predecessor, Batman Begins, and became the highest grossing movie of the year, with just over $1 billion at the box office. It was the first superhero movie to become the biggest of the year worldwide, and it didn't suffer in critical reception either. It remains at a very impressive 94% on Rotten Tomatoes. Its 2012 sequel, The Dark Knight Rises, actually increased in box office, although it was slightly less well received. Still, The Dark Knight Rises is by no means a real drop-off. So, it could be said that it was Christopher Nolan's Batman trilogy that broke the pattern of diminishing returns for superhero movies, and finally broke the genre through to bankable, mainstream acceptance. And to some extent this is true. The Dark Knight in particular was a powerful catalyst to which the superhero genre owes much. But a key difference between Christopher Nolan's Batman series and the MCU is sustainability.
Victory has defeated you.
The success of Nolan's Batman series relied entirely too much on one man, Nolan, and when he was out, he was out. The series had to end. However, 9 years and 16 films in, the consistency of the MCU films is astounding, both in box office gross and critical reception. It has become the most bankable franchise ever, with over $12 billion worldwide gross in total, and no entry has ever dropped below 67% on Rotten Tomatoes. There are a multitude of reasons why the MCU has maintained such a high standard of quality over their many films, but one of the biggest is perhaps the fact that the guy steering the ship, Kevin Feige, is a true, authentic comic book fan, and as such truly understands why superheroes and the worlds they inhabit are so great. I'm sure when Feige was in school he brought a comic book to class and got called Poindexter too. I mean, look at him. Is that not the face of an authentic nerd? No offense. Christopher Nolan's Batman films were awesome, but they weren't necessarily authentic to the comics. Kevin Feige and Marvel Studios, on the other hand, wanted to make superhero movies from the perspective of a true comic book fan, and I'm sure this overall vision and tone is communicated to every writer, director, and team member they work with. In addition, I'm sure Feige runs a tight ship when it comes to maintaining a high standard of quality at every stage of the filmmaking process. This may be how the MCU has stayed so consistent over its 16 entries thus far, but realistically, how long can it last?
It's not gonna stop, it's never gonna stop. They're a hit-making machine.
There were also a lot of great writers, directors, and producers making westerns in the 50s and 60s, and yet that genre's popularity declined over time. In spite of the MCU's great sustainability, will it and the whole superhero genre eventually follow this trend? One thing I know for sure, with all the rising and falling of the genre's popularity over the years, the core audience, the real comic book fans, have always and will always stay true to comic book superheroes. So I'm not talking about them. I'm talking about the casual fans, the mainstream audience that ultimately make this genre bankable. Will these fans eventually get sick of superheroes? If the MCU was the only entity to consider, I would say not for a long time. This is how strongly I believe in Marvel Studios' overall vision. But the MCU isn't the only entity to consider. There is also the DCEU, the DC series, the X-Men franchise and its related series, and the video games that accompany many of these. Then there are the multitudes of other companies looking to cash in on this entertainment trend. As a fan of superhero movies and other forms of superhero entertainment, I worry that eventually it will all be too much, and we will once again experience a massive dip in the popularity of this genre. But if this is true, when will it happen? I'm sure Phase 3 of the MCU will be great, and I have faith in Phase 4 as well. But what do you guys think? Will Phase 5 be pushing it too far? And if not, when should the MCU call it quits and ride off into the sunset? Or should they simply keep going with no end in sight? And what about the DCEU? Will they even make it to a Phase 3 or a Phase 4? Let me know your thoughts on this and my other points in the comments below. Is superhero entertainment oversaturating the market? I believe it is, but slowly. Superheroes are the biggest thing ever right now, but it's only a matter of time before the genre experiences a crash.
Does anyone have any orange slices?
Of course, the core fans will be there through that crash, and once it occurs, it will only be a matter of time before the genre resurges once again. I only wish producers would ease off the superhero stuff a little bit, so they don't crash it too soon. But let me know what you think. Please like the vid and subscribe if you enjoyed it and want to see more sacrilegious superhero content. Until next time.